holidays? Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask if anyone has agenda amendments. I have one, and that is I would like your permission to do a little bit of change in the correspondence items for future. If we could spend 10 minutes and let Jay talk to us for a little bit, 5 to 10 minutes, and then go back onto the schedule. He has to leave after that. Is that okay? Does anybody else have any others? Jay, you're up.
Okay. This is advice from legal counsel that's representing our class action lawsuit. And they've expressed a concern. And that concern is with regards to the holding of the organizational meetings coming up. They are of the opinion that pressure being put upon boards that are subject to forced mergers to hold these organizational meetings as an indication of their willingness to comply with voluntarily to a merger. Couple that with the advice that's being given to some school districts to simply implement the default articles and amend them later. Default articles are, at least in their opinion, are written to support implementation of the merger and not written in such a way that would provide us with the protections that we were seeking by submission of voluntary government structure proposal. So they're a little concerned about the possibility that it might affect our ability to make our case in class action suit on an individual basis for those folks that go ahead with something like that. Now, what's interesting is that what plays into this is that Section 10 of Act 46, as amended by Act 49, states that school districts subject to merger are allowed to, or I should say, they're required to create a committee. The committee has 90 days to come up with articles of agreement of their own. So it's our opinion that it would be far better for us to create our own articles of agreement that would be crafted in such a way that would provide us the protections that we were seeking in the alternative government structure proposal. I have drafts of articles here. They're not written in stone. They cover a lot of very important issues like representation on the board, school closures, contract recognition, and a lot of other things too. But at any rate, I don't have time tonight to share or go into that with you. What I would rather do, if it's at all possible, I'd like to convince you to move quickly to establish a committee as described in Section 10 so that we can sit down and very quickly draft the articles of agreement that would provide us the protections that we're looking for. Time is of the essence, and we don't have a lot of it to spare. The issue that I have is, and I'm just sharing with Julie, is that I don't really know how we can conduct a organizational meeting without being able to tell the voters what articles of agreement that we're going to be using. Are we going to be using the state's default articles, or are we going to be using articles that better suit our purposes? The interesting thing, as I said, there's no provision in the statute, and I don't understand why this happened, but there's no provision in statutes that give the authority to the state board to approve our articles under these circumstances. So it's up to the committee to craft the articles and reach agreement within 90 days, after which they agree those articles go before the voters when they create their organizational meeting. Just as an example of how this works, if you were to submit a merge proposal under Act 46, whether it be a side-by-side, whether it be a red or mud or whatever, you would be required to develop a plan under 706. That plan would have to include articles of agreement. Go to the state board for approval. If they approve it, then you go to the voters. So in our particular case, since it was Section 9, we had no need to create articles of agreement because basically we were looking to keep our own autonomy and several other benefits of that. So the state, when they developed their default articles of agreement, didn't follow the process that's outlined in Chapter 11. They simply made an arbitrary decision based on whether or not, in our particular case, in my opinion, the decision to force us into emergence in order to create a preferred structure. That's why they got rid of Sheldon, so that the remaining members of Franklin were put into a preferred structure. So our AGS was not based on, or approval or denial of our AGS was not based on merits. It was based on another criteria. That's not supposed to be. So at any rate, just to recoup here, I strongly urge the board to move quickly to establish a committee so that we can get busy with creating those articles of agreement. We don't have a lot of time, but I think we can get it done before the 23rd.
Wow, before the 23rd. So we will talk about this in terms of timing when we get to that part on the old business in Act 46, because we have such a short time period for so many things. That's what that's going to be one of the discussions, and there's going to be other discussions too about the name, the filings, this, you know. To me, just to kind of follow up on this, to me it would seem that if an injunction is made, then there's a lot more weight to the attorneys that are suggesting this, that if that injunction comes through, that means that it's much more likely to have impact, in my opinion.
Well, that's probably true. Obviously, if an injunction is imposed, then everything stops. But putting an awful lot on that, on the injunction being certain, and we don't even know what type of injunction is going to be placed upon us, how long it's going to last, and the duration, and so forth. So you're basically putting all your eggs in one basket, and you have an opportunity to create something that would give us the protections that we're looking for. You know, even if the worst case scenario we're forced into this merger, as I said, I've got several of the more prominent issues addressed in articles that are not written in stone. I've been working with the attorneys to draft them. But I think you'll be surprised at what I have. I wish I had time to go into it tonight, but I don't. I've got a birthday party to get to. But I can assure you that there is reason to believe that we can create articles of agreement that could provide us with the protections that we need to keep as much of our autonomy in our way of operation right now. So, but I wouldn't. I mean, I'm a betting man, so I'm not sure that I want to place the harm on the actions of the courts. So just announce a precaution on our part. So again, I would urge you guys to move quickly and get that committee together and get this done.
Thank you. Did you leave anybody with any of those suggestions?
Pardon me?
Anybody else have a copy of those suggestions?
I don't. You're welcome to make copies of everything I've got. I brought the articles, and when we wrote the articles, I cited the statute that supports the article and the footnote for all the articles. So it's a lot of intense reading, and there are some very surprising articles that I'm sure you haven't probably thought of.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if you want, somebody can make copies now, or I can make arrangements. What I can do is I make copies of arrangements.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay.
Happy birthday to you. Any other members of the public wanting to say anything? Not yet.
These are our central office.
Yes, that's what I figured. But they're also members of the public.
They are.
Okay, great. Not yet. Okay, so anything else? Anyone? Before we move on? Okay, how about approval of the December 10th Supervisory Union meeting minutes? Did we get those? Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded? Sure, it's busy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? No. Okay.
I'll abstain. I was abstaining.
Okay, thank you. So we had one abstain. Thank you, Julie. You got that? And did you see Dennis?
I didn't. It was
And Bob?
Dennis and
Dennis moved and Bob
Bob
seconded.
second.
Sure. You getting that or?
Okay, I
Dennis made the motion and Bob seconded.
approve the minutes. Yeah,
He was chatting.
well,
No, I know
Yeah,
it's
I was
important.
trying to point out something.
I know it's important.
Yes, okay, I'll correct that. I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I know it's important. Okay, so we're on to the fiscal then. Status of budgets, updates.
I don't have any changes to the budget drafts from what I gave you last month. We're sort of in that in-between mode where we're not sure which way we're going, but, so I have not made any changes to those. So probably next month, we'll have a better idea.
And I think should there not be an injunction and we have the organizational meeting, and the first meeting of the board meeting at that night, even if it's just to schedule other meetings, if we get to that point, I think it would be very important for us to schedule a budget meeting immediately.
Yeah.
But not at 9 o'clock at night
Right.
on January 23rd, but
But like
very
the next
quick.
day.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. So what about announced tuition rate and reaction?
Again, because we are in between what we're going to, what we presume we're going to look like and what we currently are, announced tuition has to be announced by January 15th. At their last meeting, I think it was before the break, MDU did announce their high school tuition rate. Because we could be a single district next year, we probably want to announce an elementary school tuition rate. When we announce, we are setting the maximum that we can actually charge, so we can set it high, because we don't really, or higher than what we have in the past, to give us some flexibility. We can always actually charge less than that, but we cannot charge more than we announce. MVU did announce 16.5 at their last meeting. Might suggest 14,000 or something like that for elementary, which is higher than what we've seen, but I'm not really sure what it's going to work out to be
Did you know
specifically.
what the percentage increase was for MVU?
That was a big jump because
It was a jump.
precautionary,
Right, it was like 14.9 or something before.
14,999.
Because I'm thinking we need to go even
29.
higher for elementary.
Well, high school's higher.
Right, I don't mean higher than
Oh.
that, I just mean higher than the 14.
What was it?
Well, Swanton's only paying like 12,264 or something like that is what we charged the family this past year for, so I think you can
Okay.
safely, special ed costs and transportation are not included in that calculation, and that's a huge percentage
Okay.
of your cost
Thank you.
What was the highest elementary school last year?
in the state of Vermont.
No, in our district.
Oh, Swanton,
Swanton was the highest. How much was
At
that?
12,264, I think it was, or something.
So I think 14 would certainly be
14
a
is
good
good.
number to set as a maximum.
And I'm sorry, of course you guys have it totally figured out. That's good.
It's important to know the whys behind
Right,
it.
yeah.
And we would charge one tuition for elementary no matter what school.
Yes,
Just wanted to be clear about that.
that's good. Thank you.
14.9 to 16.5.
Yeah. That's
For
what
MVU.
I'm
For
doing.
MVU.
Yeah. So we would want a motion for that, even though it's really the new district board that would be setting those, none of the districts that are in our position will exist until after the January 15th deadline. So it's one of those things where the parts of the agency of ed are saying different things to one another, but we feel that this is as safe as we can be. We can let people know and announce it, and then approve it later should we need to.
I think it's.
Can we announce the tuition rate for all the elementary schools at this meeting, can the SU do that, or does that have to be each school?
Well, we just choose one rate.
Right.
Technically, right now, we're not the body that should be doing it at all.
Right.
So I think at least all of the elementary schools are represented here. I think we can, you're right, it's kind of an odd situation.
It did at an MVU meeting.
Right.
Right. All the elementary schools will not meet before the 15th, probably.
The whole state is having this dilemma right now. It's been at every VASBO meeting, the Vermont Superintendent's Association meeting. No one knows where to have this approved, what to approve. So I think we're all just doing the best that we can. And I think Franklin Northwest to us, at least Becky and I, makes the most sense moving forward for sure, that motion would happen here.
Every school has a quorum. Every school board has enough votes, right? For pass. I mean,
It
But
doesn't
they're only
mean that
saying-
the other three elementary schools couldn't discuss it and formalize that in their local meetings, but I just don't believe they will all be meeting before the fish meeting.
I guess what I was saying is all the local boards are represented
Right.
here with the.
And I'm fine with it, don't get me wrong.
No, but it's a good
It's a
point.
good question.
Yeah.
And I went to a meeting of superintendents that are in our situation with folks from the AOE, School Board Association, Superintendent's Association, Chris Leopold was there, they had some other heads of state, and other experts, and then districts that have been through it, right? And all of them said, when this question came up, they all said, statute says January 15th, probably best for us to do a thing, no matter how, by January 15th.
Well, I'd like to make a motion, we set the elementary tuition rate for the district at $14,000.
I'll second it.
Do you
Any
want to add a
discussion?
secondary rate in there as well, just so that they're both in the same motion, or even though MVU already did approve or
Oh,
announce
right,
it?
we can certainly add the high school rate at 16.5 as part of that motion.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passed. Thank you for that, taking care of that. Great.
If it's wrong, it can come back on me because I made the motion, and I won't be here that much longer, so.
That would
You
be-
say that a lot.
Well, as I see it, the MDU board is going to be defunct as of June 30th, so.
There's always Highgate.
That's pretty far away.
Okay, so moving on, superintendent's report and central office updates.
Because we're going to be having a lot of robust discussion about Act 46, and I do not have a newsletter right now, there's not a heck of a lot to put in there between the December and now. I think I will have something for the local board meetings later. But we have some folks from central office that can give their updates in person. You want to start? You're on the end of the row.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick update, but it highlights some of the work that is being done in special education and by our special educators throughout the district. And so when we think of special ed, we often think of the things that special educators do that's substantive, like, programs and the work they're doing with students, but they also have a piece of their job that is very much about procedures and following the law and, crossing their T's and dotting their I's and having their paperwork done on time. And so the Agency of Ed monitors us every year through child count, and they look at our annual review dates for IEPs. So IEPs have to be updated every year by the annual date, and then evaluations need to be done every 3 years for students by a certain date. And so we just got our report back, and out of all of our evals and our IEPs that were done in the 2017 year, so that's the year they look at as of this past time around, we had 100% compliance with our evaluations, and we are 98% compliant with our IEPs, and that just means meeting those deadlines. So though that's not the favorite part of certainly most of our special educators' jobs, it's a very important part, and they're very diligent about getting that work done. And what that means for us is that we're on track, we're following the rules, we're doing what we need to do, and often if we don't meet a certain threshold of percentage, then we have to go back and do some workshops or training or some corrective action plan. So we're well beyond that. So I just wanted to highlight that, that good work that our special educators are doing.
100% is a big deal.
Yeah.
There's always something
Yeah.
that goes awry.
Well,
But-
and what happens is they shoot out a report to me and they say, oh, well, these things kind of showed up and we have questions about them. And then I go back through all the IEPs and the dates and look to see, oh, no, actually that was done on time. We kind of sift through them and give a final report, and then we get their final review back. So I just think that's I've never really seen that before in a district, so I think it's something to celebrate.
That is great.
It was great.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Amanda?
I guess I feel the same way that not a lot has happened in December. It was such a short amount of time, but classrooms are running well, and the process of working with HR because we have one teacher going on maternity leave in February, so we're working on staffing for that. We've done a little bit of work in the general state as far as continuing to talk to childcare licensing and trying to accommodate public schools and how they fit into the licensing regulations. So there's ongoing conversations about how to make that fit for public schools better, which is really nice. And still working with a lot of Act 166 partnership sites and making sure that we have our partnership going strong with those sites and understanding how the regulations are working for both of them. So it's kind of the big picture of the state also.
I did see that Vermont Bigger article that
Did
you
you see
sent
that?
later, but
I
I
forwarded
did
that to
see
you.
where Secretary French said it was Act 166 implementation's pretty messy.
It's messy, and it's gonna be really big this year in the legislature. And so there's new electives, new committees, and so there's gonna be a lot of new discussion on that topic. It'll be in the news, I guarantee.
That was a good article, I forget when it was, but it's been like a month, hasn't it, since it was out there?
I did that in December anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lauren, Becky, do you want to?
So our new server for Infinite Visions for our financial management and HR software was installed today successfully. They tested it and it works, it functions properly. We're migrating all of the data tomorrow. It was supposed to be the 28th, but I encouraged our tech director to make a phone call and let them know how urgent that was, and he was able to convince them to do it tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll be offline for about 4 hours, but we will have a brand new server, awesome backup on-site and off-site, and should never have an issue like we had a few weeks ago. So that's making us really happy right now. Also, it's the end of the calendar year, so even though we operate on a fiscal year, we still have a lot of things to do in the business office. We're processing all of our federal and state quarterly and annual paperwork and reporting requirements, and the girls are working very, very, very hard on ACA reporting of 1095s and W-2 reporting. And so it's all the more reason we need to make sure our system is very secure before we engage in that work. We are meeting on the January 9th to have our kickoff meeting for our new financial management software that we know that we have to implement per the AOE. We also are continuing our work, finding it hard, to be honest with you, to fit in updating our chart of accounts and doing that conversion work after our workshop. We've had several dates that we've had to push back because the people in our office are just not able to stop what they're doing to get to that. So it's something we're continuing to struggle with, but it does have to be done. So not a lot to update there, but in the next couple of months, we'll get there one way or the other. A lot of other stuff, but I can't think of anything right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Central office. Kosha would have been here, but she wasn't feeling very well, so I told her to stay home and get better.
That's good. So, are we ready to go into the next? It seems like it's not old business, does it?
Continuing business.
Continuing business, Act 46.
All right, so, I have for you, I thought you should have handouts. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right.
Thank you all for coming on January 2nd. I was thinking one of you going to come to.
And those out too?
Well, that comes, yeah. Anybody is interested in the organizational meeting information? I'm sure you know it.
I haven't.
You have it?
I believe. Is it the warning?
But, what's that? Here we go.
Julie, this is really helpful.
Well, it's good to have things on the screen, but it's not all that easy. I have make this bigger. Wait, what you have does not have the cover page, and there's an appendix A that you don't have that is a script for the designee of the Secretary of Education to open the meeting. I figured, yeah, it's not all that interesting. But I did give you the warning, and we'll go through that piece. There's a draft, there's an appendix B that has a little more information. It's sort of a commonly asked questions and suggestions. And it was updated, there may have been a previous version. Now, do you not have it,
I got a copy of it.
Okay, perfect.
I have the warning.
Okay, I want you to be able to, it's dense. There's a lot in here, so it's good to have something in front of you to make notes on. So, again, this is based upon the fact that this is in order to school districts from the State Board of Education that we shall hold this meeting before January 29th. We chose the 23rd because we reached out to town clerks, the school board, chairs about, to find a date that was as close to the 29th as possible, but wasn't a conflict for select board meetings or any other meeting. And the 23rd, Barnes Swan that is going to move its meeting, that was the only conflict, so that's where that date was chosen. So, some of the pieces, I'm looking in two places at the same time. It's disconcerting, I apologize. So, Article 8 of the Articles of Agreement that were imposed upon us, or would be if we don't create our own, lays out this process. So that's what the Article 8 is speaking to. And the first page is really about the fact of who determines the location, date, and time, and who does the warning, and the fact that the new union district is responsible for any costs associated with providing notice, and those kinds of things. And this states that the articles require that the meeting occur no later than January 29th. To ensure sufficient time for the transitional board to warn a special district meeting to amend the articles within the legislator's February 28th deadline for that vote. So they're stating that they chose that January 29th date so that if we choose to have a study committee, not a study committee, what they call it, but an amendment committee, that each local board would appoint a member to. This board, probably on the 23rd itself, would, if all the work was done, would then accept that and warn the special meeting before February 28th. So it wouldn't be this board that warns the meeting, it would be the new district board.
The transition.
The interim transitional board, yes.
Versus changing the amendments and having them ready for the
Well,
January 23rd meeting.
if you had an opportunity, pardon me, to get some of that work done ahead of time, and I think that the group would need to be in agreement. The new board on the first night can't say, yeah, we'll warn the meeting, and then argue over whether which articles get, that would make no sense. So you'd have to be in a place where you have consensus. I think, before you get there. But that's, again, part of the reason why that date was chosen. Apparently. Now, the Secretary of Education or their designee would be the one to call the meeting to order. Stop me, ask questions. I just, for me, I need to read through the minutes to be able to not jump all over the place. only individuals, the procedure for voting, only individuals who reside in the towns included in the new district and are registered to vote in that town are authorized to vote, and you must be present to vote. The town clerks of each town or their assistant would need to be present at the entrance of the room. We're going to be voting here, meeting here and voting here, so the town clerks would be set up in front to check off folks from the list of authorized voters. And of course, people should be given index cards or things like that, because I assume that someone will want to call for paper ballots for some of the items. So they even have given us some language for motions and things like that. We will need to have someone who will take minutes until the temporary clerk and permanent clerk are elected. And later we'll get to the appendix B that speaks about the purpose of each article. Each temporary officer, which is, I think, what they're calling the temporary transitional board members, will be sworn in before they begin duties. They put that in the warning. And what's interesting is that the attachment called it an article, swearing in, but it's not something to be voted on, so I think it really depends upon how formal you want to be, but it doesn't have to be Article 2. It could certainly just be something that is conducted within the meeting, if that makes sense. But it is important that, because you'll have the town clerks there, you just need, I think, one of the town clerks to swear in the temporary clerk. And they have the oath right there. So, if we jump to the appendix, there are tips in here, actually. It says, consider seating the members of the transitional board at the front of the room so it's easier to introduce them and swear them in. Consider lining up potential candidates for temporary officers, moderator, clerk, and treasurer in advance of the meeting, which is something we are looking to do. We do have someone who's agreed to be the temporary presiding officer. The reason why they do that, and I honestly can't remember if I talked about this in our last meeting, because they are running together a little bit. Honestly. But it was asked at the meeting I attended with superintendents who were going through this. Why do we elect a temporary presiding officer and then turn around 2 seconds later and elect a moderator? And the answer was, your moderator might not be there. The person that you really want to do it for the year may not be in attendance. So, you may have a pinch hitter. So, we are definitely trying to make sure that we have people to be nominated for clerk and treasurer. And we have to think about compensation for those positions ahead of time. I did reach out to one school district to see what that was merged, to see what they paid, and they were really happy with it. I think that they felt like they gave more money to the job that had less work, and if they were to do it again, they'd do it differently. So I intend on reaching out to several merged districts to find out what is the work. The treasurer needs to come to central office at least twice a month to sign checks, to look at warrants. There are always emergencies and things like that. That's definitely more responsibility than the clerk who needs to, once a year warn and take care of ballots. So those kinds of things we'll have set ahead of time. And one thing that I learned that was very interesting is the Secretary of State's office that's in charge of elections defers to the agency of ed when it comes to education elections. They say, that's not really our thing. Call the agency of ed. So it was interesting. So I have more pages than that, I apologize. So, I did touch on it in Appendix B. The first thing is we'll elect, there will be, someone from the Agency of Ed will open the meeting, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, I assume, unless people don't want to. We don't have to. And then we'll elect somebody to take over as a temporary presiding officer. Then swear in the transition board. Then adopt Robert's Rules of Order. Then elect a moderator, a clerk, and a treasurer. And again, those are folks that are outside of the school districts that serve in those roles. The board will elect its own clerk, but that's not the same role.
Are those roles transit, again, temporary again, for the temporary?
No, they would be for the year.
Even though it's for the.
They would be, yes, even though we're temporary, this is an opportunity, the electorate will be voting on these positions. The rest of us are temporary, us, I'm just in the audience. I get to vote though.
Julie,
Yes, sir.
so when you say elect, is this floor votes?
This would be,
Potentially.
absolutely, this meeting will be town meeting style, with a moderator and articles, and people can call for a paper ballot if that's the case, but it could, be a show of hands as
Okay.
well.
So it's not the board voting, it's the
It's
citizens.
the community.
Yeah, but I
yeah.
didn't know if it was on a ballot or,
No, but
from the
people
floor.
may, especially when we're voting about how we're gonna vote,
Yeah.
that probably should be a paper,
Oh,
somebody
absolutely.
call, yeah. Because you don't wanna just, I expect that there will be people who want either, I don't know that the room will be in full consensus, so it's better to have a paper ballot.
I think we better plan on it not.
Right. We need our pieces of paper for that. So, for example, if we're voting on the moderator and there's one nominee and everybody likes the one nominee, there's no need for a paper ballot for that.
presiding officer costs one vote.
Right, but if we have, and one thing Pierrette and I were talking about today is the next one is setting the date for our annual meeting. But we won't have decided whether we want to do Australian ballot yet or not. So it's kind of an odd lineup. So if we say we want to meet annually on town meeting day, that's fine. Then we vote on whether we want to vote the budget by Australian ballot or not. Well, if we don't, then we've just determined that our town meeting, school district meeting, will be held on town meeting day, probably in the evening. So that would be a long day. So it doesn't feel like it's a great order. I don't believe we're allowed to switch the order. Didn't we come up with that? Didn't we come up with that, Bob, in one of those meetings we had, and we were told we can't switch the order?
Right.
So,
I believe it states that in the fall articles of the agreement.
yeah, we're really not supposed to switch the order. So, we need, and honestly, this is why it's important to make sure that we have a lot of community members here, because it's gonna be a change for someone, and we want it to be, have as many voices as possible to make that decision. One of the things that I think might be helpful for this section is have some kind of presentation about what the options, because if I'm just sitting there from Highgate and I know I want to vote for town meeting because I like my town meeting, but I don't necessarily know it wouldn't be taking place at my Highgate town meeting. It would not be the same. It would be a separate meeting. I think we owe.
I think we have to liken it to the old NBU
Exactly.
meeting, so people have a point of reference to
Yes.
relate it to.
Well, younger
For old people.
community members.
Say, but there's
And by that, I don't mean age age-wise, but I've only lived here for 16 years, so I have no recollection of doing anything but going to the ballot box. But, so people who are longtime community members, for sure, will remember that. So I think that's maybe a couple slides, just
Yeah, so
of,
it's clear that it's gonna
Yeah.
be different than what they're
yeah.
used to.
Here's what it would look like if we
regardless of
did
where.
Australian ballot and what we could do. Here's what it would look like if we chose not to do Australian ballot and what we would do. And even making, maybe even a slide about picking the date of the annual meeting. So since we can't change it, we can say, if we choose town meeting day and you don't do Australian ballot, that's locking us into a meeting that same day. And people may say, that works for me, I've got the day off. This is, this is when people are used to voting. I did speak with someone who was in a community where they voted, they held their meeting. No, it was NBU, it used to hold its meeting the week before.
Informational meeting.
Right.
So it's-
Well, the meeting itself,
We had actually a
Used to
town
be during
meeting.
February vacation.
and nobody's there.
Right, but that's what we did.
That'll happen if they go Australian ballot
Yeah,
and you try to give an informational meeting, 2 people show
Right.
up and that's it.
yeah.
Where we should be a town, the town meeting style
Mhm.
to definitely get more people on
Well,
the same day.
If we could, well, again, that doesn't mean we could do this. We could also kick it out to April. You don't want to kick it out too late, because if it's too late, you don't have a lot of turnaround time. There are challenges with the budget, and you run into contract issues and timelines for employees and things like that. So you do, but Essex Westford does it in April. They vote on their budget in April.
You know
So,
how much shorter town meeting's gonna be without actually a portion of the,
right?
I mean, you think about how long our town meeting is at Highgate,
Yeah.
but we go to school until 10 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right, yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say, is that there's not really much of a town meeting without the school meeting, so people would be able to go for 2 hours and be done town meeting and then come to it, so it might not be a
It
crazy
might not be as
idea.
bad as you'd
Yeah.
be thinking.
But I don't know if the voters would support a town meeting style meeting anyways, it's Swanton and,
Let's hope so, yeah.
yeah, Swanton has a lot of voters and people are used to doing it now when they do budget.
But we need them to show up.
Show up.
Right. Well, and that's why it's important to have people, folks there, in speaking with the town clerks, there are a lot of people in Highgate that would like to go Australian ballot, but they don't show up to vote when it's on the agenda at town meeting. So, it,
Because it can't.
right. And frankly, I mean, if it's something that makes it easier to transition, then it's really, obviously, it's one of those things that either way, you make it work and you figure out a way to inform as many people as possible, and so forth.
So I've been thinking about this issue a lot. And I had thought that if we did an informational meeting, if a representative of the school district of some sort showed up in the morning or afternoon in Franklin, and the opposite in Highgate, during traditional town meeting, and did an informational meeting with public questions and the whole 9 yards. You cover those 2 towns on town meeting day, where you have your biggest group of voters show up in one place at one time. For Swanton, you would have to figure out a time to do the informational meeting. But town meeting day is always the first Tuesday of March. If you warn your school vote the following Tuesday, I mean, it gives this board time for contested budgets. I mean, you push it out to April, then you're May, and by the time you get a vote potentially to pass. So that's just a thought for you guys to think about.
That's the thought that'll come up at the organizational meeting, when people talk about
Yeah.
going forward for years future. How would we want to do this, and that's the strategy.
So I think it will be important to have a couple of slides that sort of lay out those scenarios.
Yeah, like you
Um,
mentioned.
So, you know, we could even have an informational meeting and then do something at town meeting as well, even though people were voting on town meeting, if that's how the electorate chooses. So there are things we can do, but again, the biggest piece is to make sure, I was speaking with a select board member today, it's to make sure people know that this is what the 23rd will be deciding, and people will make the decision. So it's important to get the word out.
Yeah, what suggestions do they have for getting the word out? Did they,
I know that for the young families that I've been speaking with, the fact that it's at 7 o'clock on a weeknight is proving difficult for both parents to be able to get there. It's childcare. I know that MVU did something over the holidays where it was like, you know, a couple bucks and they watched kids for a few hours. I don't remember the exact details, so we didn't do it, but.
That's a great
It
idea.
is
It's
in
really
Franklin, we've
popular.
done that in the past, where we've had meetings, the informational meetings, we've provided daycare in the library, and high school students that were looking for
It was
community
like the
service.
National Honor
Their
Society.
National Honor Society hours, did that to get some hours.
That's a great idea.
We have a daycare during town meeting in the library.
That would be great, because that's, I know, you know, for my husband and I as well.
Yeah.
Can both of us actually get there? So,
Yeah. We went around about the time, because it is late, but then many families want to go home from work.
yeah.
And eat something and then come to a meeting. So I think, I'll speak with folks at MBU to see if there's anything that we can do.
That'd be great.
So
I think that would alleviate a lot.
Very helpful.
Sure,
And then we
folks
can
will-
publicize it.
National Honor Society would be happy to get their hours.
And that takes away a big excuse from spending money.
Yeah. Really helpful, thank you. So essentially, those articles, the annual meeting date, the decision whether we're gonna vote on the budget and all other public questions by Australian ballot, to determine whether we're gonna elect members of the district board by Australian ballot, those are interconnected. So I think it's important to do a quick, and again, not like choose this, not that, just here's one, here's the other, you know. I don't want people to feel like if they vote for a town meeting that they're gonna have the discussion at their Highgate or Franklin town meeting. And somebody in Swanton office asked me, does this mean we would have to have a town meeting in Swanton? And I said, no, we have like an MBU, and that relieves them a little bit. So there's a lot
Whether
of
it would change
confusion.
everything to a
Right.
town meeting, yeah.
So next is determining the compensation for the officers, that's moderator, clerk, and treasurer, and I will do some research around that I think will help. Determining and approving compensation, if any, to the members of the district board. I think we should all get a raise.
Well, there's gonna be so many fewer board members.
There'll
I
be-
think there would be a great opportunity for a raise, as I don't believe there's ever been a raise. So I think we're looking at, well, depends on what
Right,
our articles state,
right. If it stays at 6 members,
which it shouldn't. It
but
should be an odd number.
it should be 9. Whether we do it now or later, it should be 9.
Should be 9.
But still, it's a very large budget. It's a large school district. It's, you
It should be
know,
minimum wage.
I know if we can afford that.
The $15 minimum wage?
Livable wage.
Should be. Well, I think that's something we need to look into. Absolutely.
Definitely. The opportunity to do it.
We will definitely have to
We talked about it every year.
make sure we have provision to pay for any expenses before it becomes fully operational. So the cost of the votes, those kinds of things. Any legal fees that have to be incurred, we have to have authority from the voters to pay some bills. And authorize us to borrow money pending receipt of payments, just as we do in the local budgets all the time, so that we can borrow in anticipation of funding in July from the state taxes. And that is the meeting.
Time's up.
That was perfect time. So I did want to make sure that I went through that with you, just even for the camera, so that folks had an opportunity to do that again. I also have something, I didn't make copies of it. I kind of ran out of time. See if I can grab it and pull it over. So this is, and I'll make sure that you get this. It's an annotated transition timeline. I think I gave you a transition timeline before. This one changed a little bit because the previous one didn't really have the information for this tightened timeline. So most of it is the same. And I haven't done a side-by-side, so forgive me. But the first meeting of the transitional board will likely be that night. We'll warn that, just as we did any other meeting. You would elect a chair and a clerk. That's not the same clerk that the community elects. And business transacted at the first or subsequent meetings would be to warn a special meeting, to vote on whether or not to amend those articles, warn a special meeting of the district to elect initial members of the new district, so probably the town meeting day election, prepare first draft of proposed budget, and any other duties, such as probably the adopt policies, perhaps adopt the master agreement rollover that we just did. I think it would be good for the new district board, the temporary transition board, to approve that formally, even though all the local boards have, just because of that. I think it's an extra step that's important. And then this one speaks to the amendment committee a little bit, so that this can inform our conversation coming up. If we choose to do it, boards of forming districts, including existing unions, so NBU, may create an amendment committee to propose amendments that would be effective on or before July 1, if they're approved by the total combined electorate of the new union district board, community. The board of forming districts participating in an amendment committee appoint one or more members to the committee. The number of members a board appoints is the same proportion as the forming district's equalized people. So this is where the proportionality does come in play. So if we choose to do that, we'll figure out the math and we can let people know. So it would be NBU, Swanton, Highgate, and Franklin, the local boards would be choosing. But not this way, but the local boards would be choosing who they want to appoint.
So MVU would have the most representation on that committee.
Because your equalized pupils are weighted too. So.
That's interesting. It's going to be run by the towns that,
Yeah.
Highgate, Franklin, Swanton.
It might make
But-
sense for
but
you to
MVU
try and have people that represent the three communities.
Well, I think we all do.
Yeah.
We're all from somewhere.
So I'm just saying that if you did have, if MBU had, say, 4 and Swanton 3, I gave her 2, then Clint had 1. If you picked 3 people from Swanton, that would be a Swanton-heavy committee.
Right, right.
But if you don't pick anybody from Swanton,
Well, Swanton would still have representation.
That is right. I guess I was thinking right off that it would make sense to have the same transition board,
Yeah.
2 people, and just have it be the 2 people from each board.
Except that it does specifically say that it needs to be proportional.
Right.
So we need to add someone from each of the other to make it that way.
So does that mean we have to wait until after the last of the individual board meetings before this committee can meet? So that each of the boards can appoint someone?
Yes, unless you have a special meeting that's, 5 minutes to do that.
You scroll up this little, I just want to see,
Absolutely.
read that again.
And I'll email this to you all.
This has to take place before February 28th, correct?
Oh, before, the committee would need to be formed before the transition board meets, so that the transition board can then warn. They only have 30 days to warn a special meeting.
okay, this is where I'm getting
So it'd
confused.
have to be
After the 23rd.
assigned, the committee would have to be built before the 23rd
Absolutely.
January.
of January.
Because you only have 30 to 40 days to warn a special meeting. So having the organizational meeting on the 23rd, if the group was ready on that day, they could say, we want to warn a meeting on February 25th for the purpose of amending the zone.
Can I just ask one thing? Let's say that you follow this guideline and the amendment committee is formed on January 23rd, and then they work on amending it, and they don't have a vote until the budget vote, because who's going to really say anything? Oh, because it has to be
It
within.
has to be within 90 days of the State Board of Education decision. So Jay's right, the timeline is very tight. So the committee would need to be formed ahead of time. Even if it's just, they spend a couple of hours together and say, yes, this is great, or no, we're not,
Yep.
Some of that work would have to happen.
So, this is saying the voters will vote on amended articles no later than February 28th. Is
Right.
that correct? So does the warning that comes out 30 days in advance need to have finalized amendments to be made?
Usually the
So
warning
that puts us
contains,
at, I'm just doing the math here, so that
Yeah.
puts us at January, January 28th, 29th, they need to be done.
yeah,
And so,
Wow.
so that,
right.
Well, that's what I was thinking when Jay was talking about having something ready for the 23rd. It's not really possible.
unless we get this committee
Right,
constructed
quickly.
quickly, this
Well,
special
even if we
meetings.
decided tonight on our amendments, we can't warn it 30 days before the 23rd.
No, it's
No.
30 days before February 28th.
We need to have the amendments ready to go to be warned by the 23rd.
Right. I thought what Jay was saying was that when we meet on the 23rd, that would be a great time to have the voters vote on the amended
That's what I thought too.
articles. I thought
On the
that's what he was
articles, the
saying.
group would have them ready, and instead of
That's why
showing
he
these
said,
articles.
have your committee ready as soon as possible to amend these articles, and I didn't see his, but.
The articles of agreement are not voted on at the organizational.
No.
They're
Right.
voted on
By
at
the,
the,
by the 28th or
If we
29th.
had
A
a draft
separate
at that
meeting.
point to say this is what we're going to
Right.
be considering.
And we don't have the authority to warn that meeting, only the new board does.
Yeah.
The temporary.
Yeah, new temporary board.
Wow.
So what he was talking about really isn't possible.
No, we can't do it for the 23rd, but we could have
We should
the
get
work
committee-
done.
Right, we should get this committee
so
together.
that on the 23rd, the new board can say, we're gonna meet about it tomorrow, or yes, we're ready, we agree, we can warn this, I mean, that,
We gotta do at least 24 hours.
Yes.
Well, it wouldn't be the new board, right?
No, wouldn't be the transition board,
Right.
it'd be a special
The
committee.
amendment committee.
The amendment.
the amendment committee will do the work, and the transition
And
board
we'd hand it
will
off
run
to
it.
the
Yes.
transition board
So,
on the
Can they make it more?
or on the, I guess, the
No.
28th of the afternoon.
I gotta say, I came into this thinking, why would we take the time when there's so much else to do amend the amendments? Part of me was saying that, because there's so much that has to be done.
These amendments are so, they break up the district so much by the wording of them that, in my opinion, that transitional board has to amend these to make it for the better good of the new district, in my opinion.
Now, how many of them can be changed according to state law at this point?
There's a
According to
list
what the
in the
state
amendments.
board says, I highlighted mine to make sense of it, because otherwise you're flipping back and forth. And I know, part of the litigation is that they disagree with this, but,
Statute and versus what the state board
right,
said.
and exactly. We have to act, we are under orders by the state board. So, I'm gonna represent to you what the state board has directed us to do in terms of what can and cannot be amended.
Right, which makes sense.
So, should I start with what cannot be amended?
Yes.
I think that was
Which is the long list.
Yeah, which is longer.
that's long. The introductory paragraph can't be amended. The first article, who the forming districts are, cannot be amended. Just Article 1A cannot be amended. So we can't just say, well, Franklin doesn't want it, so we're not putting them in here. We don't have that ability. Article 5, finances around indebtedness, operating fund surplus, and transfer of debt and funds cannot be amended. Article 6A, transfer of property to the new union district, which is a hot button one, cannot be amended. Article 7, transportation, employees, and contracts in academic year 19 and 20, that is about honoring contracts. That cannot be amended. The date and public notice of 8 organizational meetings, A, that cannot be amended. They didn't reference the rest of it, but, okay.
Yeah, they're making us do it in a certain order, so,
Yeah. Transition, 9, the transition board. D, in particular, the specific duties of that board cannot be amended.
Only Article 9D cannot be.
I'm gonna double check, I'm just looking at my highlighting.
Article 9,
yeah, interesting.
10D.
9. Oh, it says all of Article 9, so I think it's all of Article 9.
Okay.
Cannot be amended?
Not be amended. It's,
That would make more sense.
Yeah.
yeah, it was 10D, thank you, Tom. That cannot be amended.
Got it.
The swearing in and assumption of duties. The rest of 10 can be. Article 12, commencement of operations, choosing the date, that cannot be amended.
10E also.
12, yep. You're right, 10E, preparation and presentation of the proposed fiscal year budget, also cannot be amended. And 13, the dissolution of the forming districts in the SU cannot be amended.
So all of it.
Yep,
All of 15.
all of it.
This is helpful.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
Oh.
Article 14 tells you what can't be.
Article 14 tells you what can and can't.
Thank you.
But I color coded because it's easier than flipping,
Thank you.
right? It's just,
Okay.
And apparently you can't amend the Article 14.
you can. What was fascinating, and I still don't understand it, Bob, is that the second the double I in 14, which is the following articles can be amended by a majority of the voters of the new union district, right? That section of 14 can be amended by the electorate of the new union, so they can give themselves more authority to vote on more things. I think is what that means. So they could add, they could strengthen things. You could add to that list.
So even within just the sections we are allowed to modify, there are some things we could do to alleviate the concerns of some of the people from our respective towns.
Absolutely.
You know, I pulled a few just random ones that I found online, and they vary widely, the existing articles and agreements for union districts that are out there right now. Central Vermont, which is Northfield and Williamstown, in terms of the indebtedness of member districts and commingling their operating fund surpluses and reserves, they put something in there that reserve funds will be utilized for their original established purposes. So even though they were transferred to the unified district, they were still designated at that point for the original purpose for the town that contributed them. So that's just one example. And I'm sure people can get creative, and I bet Jay has quite a few things on his list of examples there. So just some things to consider. There are opportunities if we're able to move forward on this.
Well, that is in the law already, so I don't know that it's clear to people, so.
I didn't see it in.
It's not written in here, but it is in the law that reserve funds can't be touched. But those are funds that the electorate has already voted on creating. The things that, the only thing I see here that the board on their own can do is change the name of the school district.
Well, that'd be good.
You mean without a committee?
Without a committee, the board can just change the name of the district, which I know sounds like a silly thing, but I do have to say, and I know we're not talking about this, but I do have to say, when Maple Run was created, they had to fill out lots of paperwork. You have to apply for federal tax ID numbers and DUNS numbers and all of these things. And at first the agency of ed said, yeah, you can just put Franklin Central School District if you want. You can change it later. And then they said you couldn't. And then they couldn't, they had to reapply. I mean, so you really have to have your official name by the time you're applying for all of these legal entities. So what they did, they went, because they said, we don't like Franklin Central Unified Union School District, we're not doing it, you can't make us, we're gonna come up with our own name, and they went through a process, and the board sat around with all kinds of suggestions that had been given to them, and came up with Maple Run, which was not entirely popular, but people got used to it. That was a process that they did, but it was kind of after the fact. The state then learned and figured out the path, and that is that the board on the 23rd could sit there and say, we want to be X unified school district. You do have to have at least the word unified in there. So I do think it's something that we should figure out a process to have some options for the board, because if we don't have an injunction by the time and we end up having this organizational meeting, that next day we're going to have to start filling out paperwork, applying for, it takes months to get federal tax IDs and things like that. So having a name as quickly as possible would, I think, be important.
I think the goal, just to share with people who aren't in the group, the goal is to get an emergency hearing for the injunction before the first organizational meeting takes place, which is scheduled for January 9th, I believe, is the first one.
Okay.
So the goal is to get that meeting, or that hearing, and a decision about an injunction before the first organizational meeting takes place.
That would be so helpful.
Give us some idea of which road we're
Yeah.
going down.
Because honestly, it's the not knowing.
Yeah.
And we have to proceed the way that the law is telling us to, in the way we have authority right now. So if we have an injunction conversation that makes everybody panic just a little bit, one way or the other, then we know how to proceed.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask a clarifying?
That would be marvelous.
Can I ask a clarifying question? And that is, okay, so that would be great. The other question that I have is to bring us back here. As I was saying before about how I thought we have so much work to do, what about these amendments? But we're gonna have to get them ratified. We have to warn for a meeting in February anyway about the amendments, because we can't vote on any amendments on January 23rd meeting. So it's really not much work. It's not more work. People
Well,
want to do it.
correct me if I'm wrong, when we adopt a warning, we have the language of the warning. So that would include the articles as we want to amend them.
So you'd have 5 days. If the amendment committee wasn't put together and doing the work, if it was just up to the transitional board, if you have your first meeting the 23rd at 9 o'clock at night, you would have until the 28th to get it approved and warned.
Oh, no, I guess my point here, because I get that, is that regardless, we can't approve anything that we have, whether it's amended or whether it's real, the one they gave us, on the 23rd. We have to go to February. So we gotta do the work to get them approved anyway.
If we do not have our own voter-approved amended articles, then the draft articles are the ones in place.
Oh, okay, so it
February-
is.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought there was gonna be more work with it.
Oh, yes, it's more work, but it depends on what's important
Yeah.
to the community, and if we can get it done, and it's legal, and the voters approve it, and now the voters could say, no, I don't like any of this, I don't want to merge, and then we would then be back, but at least we would have gone to the voters, I think is what I'm hearing.
And it would make a couple of communities feel better, right, if we did it?
I think that it would at least feel that they were being heard and
Yeah.
their concerns would be
And-
concerns.
Yeah, and it sounds like we've got people who are willing to volunteer to do it. Do we have to do this proportional stuff,
Yeah.
even in the beginning?
For the amendment committee.
The
What's
amendment.
interesting to me that MBU, like what you were saying, is gonna have the largest representation, even though we're not a community.
Right?
And they won't have any.
So I think by MBU's designation, we can achieve what we were talking about with the representation of the amendment board, to be somewhat equal across the
Yeah.
communities by manipulating who you assign to that committee.
Yeah, you can get there. I mean, it might not be 100% exact, but it'd be pretty darn close.
And would amendment committee members be anybody, or would it be from each town's current board?
It has to be one member from each
Right.
board, minimum.
Yes.
And then
It can be
Depending.
other people, but given the I don't,
For instance,
it makes sense to have board members, you don't have time to get other folks up.
Exactly.
Right,
For
okay.
instance, proportionally, Franklin would be one member, and it would
Yeah.
have to be somebody serving on the current board.
Right.
You could then, by way of
You
assigning
could pick
somebody
a
from
couple
the
of
MBU
folks from
board,
there.
that
Yeah.
is a Franklin resident, you could achieve
Some parity.
some
there.
parity
Yeah.
there, but you wouldn't be able to assign a committee member to the committee, from a community member to the committee, but it's an open meeting and.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Right.
Yeah, good point. So what do we need to do then? Are we ready to have a discussion about it?
How quickly can we get that together?
That's what I'm wondering if you want to do it tonight.
We can't, we don't have the,
This isn't the body that can do it.
we need the individual boards.
Oh,
Yeah, the individual boards have to,
Assign somebody. I'm gonna go to my calendar.
yeah, we have more.
And we could do it.
Well, you need to warn a special meeting. You can't just do it. You have to warn it.
We have to warn that we're gonna,
Appointing people?
Yes,
that we're appointing people to this committee?
because you're not here as a sworn board. and it's not a meeting that's warned to do that, conduct that piece of business.
Right, you can't, even though you have a quorum here, you can't
Okay.
adjourn your, or open your meeting. as long as-
So we have to wait until Swan meets again as a board,
Or you could hold a special meeting.
or we can hold a special meeting. Okay, that makes
As
sense.
long, if you can get a quorum of 3 folks in,
Special
you
meeting.
know, to come to the central office for 10 minutes, you know, that'd work.
What about the 9th,
See, what have we got?
the meeting on the 9th? I mean, the transition board meeting on the 9th? Did I hear that?
Not this transition.
Later in the month.
No,
Amendment, what we're gonna call it, amendment.
I don't have anything on January 9th.
The first
Oh, I thought that was
but it's not
the 9th is already set.
Oh, right.
The first schedule.
I know it's January 23rd.
I'm doing 3rd, but there's, you know,
But we have, for example, next week, we have Sheldon and Highgate meeting, so that should be fine. But if we had Swanton and MVU had a special meeting
Swan has to anyway,
in, no, not Sheldon, I just said Sheldon.
but we meet on the 23rd. And we
Franklin, you don't meet until later.
said we were gonna change that.
Right.
right, Swan and
Franklin's not till the 15th, MVU's not till the 17th. That's getting a little later. If you could get, what's the quorum for MVU?
5,
5.
challenge.
Hmm?
Yeah, I thought we had it on the 16th.
We did, Swanton did.
Yeah, we rescheduled.
It was to plan the,
It's
for
still
the
not gonna be much
transitional
time.
presentation or something.
There's a whole lot of extra time from the 23rd.
Right, because then that's the next week. So if we could maybe hold a special meeting on, say, the 9th, where MVU and Franklin and Swanton come together and carousel it or something, open meeting, vote to appoint a person, adjourn again, we could do that. And then we wouldn't have to have like a bunch of separate meetings, because it really would be a 10-minute
We
meeting.
need a quorum from each school.
Yes.
From MVU as well.
Yep,
Where Highgate can do it next
they
Thursday.
could do it next Thursday. I would think that's fine.
Well, what day's Thursday?
The 10th.
The day after.
Can we have it all, what time do you mean, start 6:30? Put
So
up
we
at
can
6
keep-
o'clock?
Well, that's true. We could try and get people there in Highgate at 6 o'clock.
What date is that?
The 10th.
Next Thursday.
So we would probably have word if we have at least a hearing.
That's where that January
Oh,
9th came
that's the
from.
day,
That
that's
was,
what,
What are we trying to do on the 10th?
We know that too.
Special meeting of,
Well, the amendment
Right.
committee.
I don't know whether we should even bother.
Right, that's what I'm
Right,
saying,
yeah.
is if the injunction is granted,
yep,
I think we should, at that point, maybe, form a committee of our own to start working on this stuff as a, so that they can hand it off to a committee, an amendment committee, so that work is done, so it's not all.
So you-
scrambling to do this when the injunction is done.
Right. Right, because just because an injunction is granted doesn't mean that at the end of that.
it could be
still
for a
have to
month.
be- Right.
Then where would we be?
so just to kind of summarize here to get us back, what did we just decide? Did we decide anything?
I don't think we decided anything. We're having a lot of
I
conversation.
thought maybe I missed
You're
it.
the boss, Terry, what did you
I'm the
decide?
boss.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's confused. So we're gonna, yeah,
Thank you,
We
John.
talked
Sorry,
about-
Bob, I didn't hear you.
I think the goal is to try to set something up ahead of the Highgate meeting on the 10th at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
If that's what I gathered from what went around. And we would know prior to that meeting whether or not we were still under the same timeline or if the injunction had been.
So we could see if Purette could get a quorum of Swanton, Franklin, and MVU on the 10th at 6 o'clock.
You'll have a
They all
quorum,
have to be
right?
warned individual meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, it's 3 separate meetings. Yeah.
Right, like our carousel meetings
It
that we
would
had.
be in
I
Highgate.
know how to do that well.
That's a good idea. That would give the warning.
We're good at it.
Right, and we could just cancel it, as you said, if there's an injunction.
Yeah, that sounds good. Good decision. Does that work for everybody?
And the second half of what you said, Bob, was that if there is an injunction, we could have an informal committee anyway that's doing.
I think it might be wise for
Yeah.
us to be working in that direction, even if it doesn't have to be anything that's set in stone, but we have some agreement around the table as to what we're looking to achieve with our
Yeah.
articles. That way, if the injunction ends and we still have to go down that road with an amendment committee, if we have a tight timeline to follow, we have some of the
Right.
roadwork already in place.
Yeah, that sounds good. What time was that, on the time?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, thank you.
So injunctions
I can
go.
be there in
I
the
could
square.
be
Be
there.
And there's different kinds of injunctions, there's a
That's the
stay,
place
We
to
don't
do
have
that.
and then there's, you know, I'm not gonna pretend to be the lawyer that I almost was, but
That feels good.
I'm not still the.
We should meet together that way.
That's being used.
Unless you're still at work, you're at work, you get appointed.
That's how we do it.
Yeah.
How does that work with board members that are on 2 boards when you do a carousel?
That's where it really tests their friendships, and see where they sit. It's not always pretty.
It wouldn't be Highgate, you'd just be your regular 6:30, you'd be part of that agenda. You don't have to come at 6.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're just doing a quick meeting to appoint the members, so it'll only be the 3 towns. And then Heidi will meet at 6:30 and they'll appoint at their regular meeting like we always do.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking of just Highgate, because Swanton has, let's see, Dawn's on both, so I didn't know how that worked. And we have one that's one of our board members on the MVU, so
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
know how that works in a carousel. When you have one person on 2 boards.
As long as we have a quorum,
Doesn't
and they
matter.
can pick whoever they want, whatever meeting they
Yeah.
want to go.
Your board member would be fine because he was not on
No, if we can just.
the Highgate board wouldn't be part of that carousel.
It's only gonna take a
He
minute.
could come at 6, being Richard, come at 6, vote for MVU, then at 6:30, vote at Heidi. Dawn's the one that would be the only one that really has a problem, and I guess as long as either MVU or Swan has a quorum.
Right.
Yeah, we're not far.
He can go to where the quorum is. Yep.
Can't the chair declare a quorum unless it's challenged from the floor? I believe so,
From the transmission.
unless it's challenged from the floor. If there's a challenge,
Right.
okay, then there's no quorum. But the chair, I believe, can declare a quorum with less than a quorum present.
It's hard to do for Franklin since that'd be just one person.
I was gonna say. We have all kinds of-
I am a quorum.
I can just
Yeah, I like this.
That's a lot of authority.
I am a quorum.
But I've never heard that one, that's good.
That's Robert's
I've
rule.
got a book,
Robert's
I got Robert's rules, it's a book that thick, and
Wow, and somebody actually read it.
somebody must have read it.
Yeah.
So, that sounds like a good plan, at least we can have something in place.
I like it.
And then kick around what amendments people are talking about and have the discussion there.
I hope it works for MVU, because it's hard to get sometimes people
Yeah,
that date works.
make sure we make, get the notices out.
5 people to commit.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on to new business?
The only other piece that I did want to jump in is about the name. One of the things I thought I would do is sort of send out one of those Google surveys with some of the options and then fill in the blanks, right? With the caveats that you have to have Unify in there and things with Missisquoi in it, things without Missisquoi, things with Franklin without Franklin, and then the other, fill in the blank, any ideas, so that the new board could look at it and see, well, a lot of people thought this was a good idea, nobody liked this one, or just take pieces of things and do what you will with it, but at least it would be some information for that new board to have at their disposal.
I think that's a great idea,
Yeah. I'll play with it.
if it's not too much.
It is not one. Once I have things in place, it only takes a minute to send out, but
Then you get all that stuff coming in.
it's just.
It goes into a spreadsheet.
It goes into a spreadsheet with little charts, and you can see how many people like Mrs. Floyd Unified School District versus the Franklin Northwest Unified School District. So, yeah.
Great.
I like the idea of the Maple Run for them because it doesn't specify St. Albans or Fairfield.
Yeah.
That's why they did it, absolutely.
It's just,
That's why, I mean, I'm just throwing it out, as Mrs. Boy would do that, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, if that's what we decide to do.
Doesn't really roll off.
We don't want something that has the same initials as like Maple Run,
right, no.
or, you know, I think that's a challenge.
Because what they've got here is it's going to be tough to initial that. And that USD.
Too many U's in a row.
Doesn't roll off the
It's
tongue.
the FN
It's the
USD.
FN, yeah.
Yes, it
Hey,
is.
there
I
it is.
said it slowly, so it's not quite. I think we could do without that.
That's good, though.
You
Thank
made
you
me
for
do
reminding
it.
us. Thank you, Julie, for reminding us of that.
If we don't see her at the next meeting, we'll know why.
So, we're doing pretty well considering all the stuff we had to deal with tonight. What about new business? Seats on the new board. Reminder to get petitions signed.
So, Purette and I spent a lot of time talking about this today. Purette drafted up petitions. We went through the fall articles, and for the initial vote, the petitions will need to be filed with your town clerks, because there is no clerk of the district elected yet. So Purette has them ready. She was going to hand them out, but we didn't have that piece of information yet. So she will email them to you. Is that what we decided?
Email them, I mean, just because I email them, I just want people to understand you can choose not to run or to run. It's not my suggestion for you
Yes.
to run or not run, it's just, we'll be providing it to you, and then obviously you can use them, and if you choose to run, and you can ignore it if you choose not to run.
Make them available at central office for anyone who wants to run.
That's printed
Or
copy too.
Disclaimer at the bottom. This petition is not endorsed by.
It was on the news today that Berlin is, they've got 2 or 3 openings for the merged board. They can't find people.
Well, I.
In Berlin, the merged district, they're looking for people, so.
I think it's important for us
For the
to
board,
have
the
people
transition.
who can do it, who can represent the communities well, and have been a part of all of this work, but,
So what about,
staring at people.
what about the board members whose terms are up now? Do we just forget about that?
Your term's up, right?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not?
Mine
I
is.
was wondering if that was so. So the
Do we?
majority,
Do we pretend that it's possible we could be here another year and
you don't have to, unless there's an injunction,
right?
you don't have to file to go on the ballot for reelection. And after town meeting day, at the organizational meeting for the local district boards, I think Bob said his seat is up. So Devin and John would appoint Bob for the rest of the school year.
That's if
Everything happens.
But what if there's an injunction?
If there's an injunction,
They have to
you
do
you should
petition.
get your
do
petition.
the whole
Those,
thing.
those are by sometime in January.
Yep.
Right?
January 28th is the date.
Oh,
And
actually,
I'm going to create an MVU petition as well as, I've already created the other, but I realized today, in case there's an injunction, it might, whoever's term is up for MVU, I will send them a petition as well under MVU in case, if they're going to go out and get the petition filled for one, they may as well do both in case, if there's an injunction, they're not going to be wasting their time having one petition and then the other one, they're going to go right around and fill it out again.
And we'll know before the
We hope to know by the 9th.
Yes.
That's right.
Where Highgate and Franklin can just do it from the floor.
Right, so
Well,
it's not a problem.
that was my question. Have you found out what, because we're in that odd situation where we have 3 people up for election?
Well, Dave is appointed until the board has an election. So if there's no,
Speak a little louder, please.
I don't know if I want to. Dave's appointment is typically until town meeting, when there's an election for a permanent board member.
Yeah.
If there is no election for a permanent board member on the Highgate board,
That means his term got
term
extended to June.
is extended till June 30th. So, he's thinking before us.
The camera's on your
I
face.
just saw one more gray hair.
So Dave and Stephen and Richard could appoint you. No, Richard is up.
Yeah, Richard and I are up. and-
So it's Lisa and Stephen and Dave could appoint you and Richard for the
Well, it's been
remainder.
done already.
So, but if there's an injunction, then it would
Then-
proceed as normal.
Right.
Yes. So vote from the floor on town meeting. And I assume if those warnings have already gone into the book, depends on the timing. If the injunction is later, then we run into when things have been warned and so forth. I don't know what the process for a town meeting to add something to the agenda would be, but you probably want to pursue that process.
I think the normal process is they open the floor for nominations.
Right. But if it's not on the agenda because it wasn't warned, because it wasn't going to happen, cross that bridge if we have to.
I guess my suggestion would be that we don't bother with nominating petitions for Swanton and MBU and nominating from the floor from the other towns. I think that if we need the members, then we appoint.
Yeah.
And we can try to appoint the ones that are already there.
The Swanton can do that, and MVU can do that. Absolutely.
Well, and even Highgate and Franklin, because if we don't put it on the warning as an action item, then
It gets dicey.
it just can be, the next meeting, they appoint that person back, or if they didn't want to be there, they appoint somebody else.
So there really isn't a need to get petitions for the local boards,
So I'm thinking,
just in case,
Right.
because the majority of other folks can appoint.
and we wouldn't know how long the injunction would last
Right.
anyway, so it could be 6 months, so.
Right.
Normally in town meeting, there's an article, the last article is any other business that needs to be handled.
So that would be
Which
too. Yep.
a floor vote of that could fall under that.
Yeah, perfect.
So you gotta be nice to your great
But MVU is open up to the entire district. Seat on MVU.
And that's what I'm thinking, rather than try to get it to the vote on the ballot, then
Just
let's just
appoint.
appoint. Like if it was your term that was up, which, was it? No, you were on last year.
That was last year.
Whoever's term is up, they get, we would reappoint them unless they were kicking and screaming and running away.
But that would have to occur in all three towns.
No, our appointment wouldn't.
MBU would to the
The
point.
board itself has the authority to
The
appoint.
board itself
To vacate.
would appoint.
Yeah.
We've done that with vacancies before. We interview and then we would appoint till the next election.
I think we have it.
The clause is the next one.
We have a path now. What about future meeting dates? We've talked about the meeting, the special meeting on the 10th in Highgate. So get that out. Okay, so 1:10 Highgate, 6 o'clock. We don't have any others, do we, for the board?
So, Julie, there was some questioning amongst board members about how that 10th meeting was going. If you warned it at Swanton's special meeting, 6 o'clock at Highgate School, Franklin, 6:15, that way everybody can, you know what I mean? So it's warned, and that business is gonna be done within 15 minutes. That way every board member has the potential to be involved in every meeting, as whether a board member or a public.
Like 15 minutes.
Yep.
We wouldn't have a vote, I wouldn't have a vote at the Highgate or Swanton meetings.
But you could
be part of the discussion. I think that's about all we're gonna have time for in 10 minutes is to say, okay, it's gonna be you.
Okay.
And convince him that it's gonna be him, and then
Maybe board chair should make a couple phone calls ahead of time.
Yeah, to see who's
line up the
willing.
people.
That's a good idea. Yeah. That is a
they
good
won't show
idea.
up. If you want it.
But if they're not there, you can appoint them.
I think there are some people who are gonna feel pretty strongly want to be on that,
Yeah.
on that amendment committee.
And that amendment committee is gonna have one job.
That's it.
Go through
Steven, I can't do it.
and Jay has already come up with a document that addresses a lot of the issues, I'm sure, more in-depth than our committee would probably do.
Sorry? I said my name.
Yeah,
Okay,
she's talking about it.
so we're good. Is there anything else that we need? Are we anticipating executive session or anything else tonight?
I don't think so.
Anyone else have any comments?
The only thing we left there is discuss future meetings for Franklin Northwest. I think we have a February meeting date. You and I discussed, whether, we didn't know whether today we'd know whether we have an injunction yet or not. We don't, I think we should hold on to that February board meeting if
Well, why don't we announce that date, so that people can all put it aside?
So our regularly scheduled date in February for this board is the 6th of February.
6th, February 6th.
What comes after?
Where would that be?
Sheldon.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
here again? We might want to talk about that. Should we do it here again instead of Sheldon?
If it's gonna be,
Sheldon's really sort of backing out of these meetings because
Right.
they have so many extra meetings they need
Exactly.
to attend.
Maybe not so.
But if we're in an injunction and need the meeting, then we're back to an SU meeting.
Right.
Sheldon's back in, go back
That's
to
right.
this instead
That is
of,
true.
so I say leave it at Sheldon.
Oh, that, or we could just switch, the next one would be Swan, and we could just switch Swan and Sheldon, and in March, have it Sheldon and just go on.
That would be
I think that'd
easier.
make it easier.
I'm just wondering if that may be a way to go.
I don't think they'd mind.
We've done it before. So we
I
want
was
to
just
do
getting used to the alphabetical.
Yeah.
what day was that?
The 6th.
So that would be
6:30.
Swanton.
Yeah.
Good, February 6th. And we'll make sure the door that we deal with that.
Julie, are you
Yes.
going to do the math on the amendment committee and how many each will?
Yes, well, I think if 4-3-2-1 is the easiest math to do, but we'll double check.
Close enough.
I mean, I don't know that we could do unless Swanton and MBU were so close that it would be a 4-4, but I don't think that's the case.
Or 3-3.
Or
2-2 or
3-3.
something.
There's at least
Because
a
it's
couple hundred
8
difference.
and 6.
Yeah. So there should be one difference.
Yeah.
So 4 from you.
And then, you're right, there's going to be people that aren't part of the committee, but they're going to be there, so I think numbers are going to be pretty, I imagine people from Franklin will be there.
Yeah, sure. Just in terms of figuring out ahead of time who's going to be on it.
Right.
If you're going to start calling people, how many we need to get.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to add that 51 from Franklin, that's gonna be something that's important.
Yes.
We can augment that quickly with it.
It's open, and they're all subject to open meeting laws, with minutes and whole nine yards.
And that committee could have transition board members.
Absolutely, probably should.
Can't have transition of,
Transition board
transition board
members.
members.
Transition, that committee should have transition.
Gonna have transition.
Thank you.
So here's something for an injunction on the.
Just add it.
Yeah. Okay, so anything else? We have a motion to, thank you. Thank you, everyone. We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. I'll second.
No, so everybody jumped up. Awesome. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.